know.
Meet the Chicago Historians will return right after these messages. Exhibitors Carpet Service has changed their name to Carpet Warehouse at 4300 West Montrose Avenue in Chicago, and their new location at 440 Sheridan Road in Highwood, Illinois, called Carpet of Highwood. Stop in and see Mike at Carpet Warehouse at 4300 Montrose Avenue, and their phone number there is area code 773-283-0100, or Brian Muir at 440 Sheridan Road in Highwood, and their phone number is area code 847-266-1400. For carpets in your living room, dining room, bedroom, den, or family room, once again, call or see Mike at Carpet Warehouse, 4300 West Montrose Avenue, area code 773-283-0100 in Chicago, or Carpet of Highwood at 440 Sheridan Road in Highwood, area code 847-266-1400. If you need a carpet for your living room, dining room, bedroom, family room, or den, stop in and see Mike, 4300 West Montrose Avenue. That's on Montrose Avenue between Pulaski and Cicero on the north side of the street. Their phone number is area code 773-283-0100. Or see Brian at their new location, which is located at 440 North Sheridan Road in Highwood. And their phone number is area code 847-266-1400. And you are listening to Meet the Chicago Historians from the John DeVita Broadcast Center. And now back to our panel and our moderator, Jack Ryan. Go ahead, Jack. It's all yours.
Well, we're having a great time as usual. Not much moderating necessary. As usual, plenty of energy, plenty of knowledge. And we sure wish we had a phone-in call. Remember, folks, you can hear us on, where's it at now? Windy City Hometown.
Entertainment Network.
No. It's WindyCityHometown.com. Of course, if you're listening to us, you already know that, so I don't know why I'm bothered to say that. Right now, let's throw this to Tom Tyler, sitting right here. And this is not Tom Tyler, the Western star who played Captain Marvel. This is our Tom Tyler. Go ahead, Tom.
Who is related to the president, Tom Tyler.
John Tyler.
John Tyler.
President of the United States.
Yeah.
Don't I wish. Okay, well, thanks a lot for tuning in with Jack.
Yeah.
Just wanted to mention what this day is all about. President's Day. George Washington, first president of the United States. He was born on February 22nd, 1732. It happens to be my birthday on that day. He was born in Wakefield, went to Virginia College University. He was Episcopalian. His profession was planner, surveyor, and he was a general as his rank. He was married January 6, 1759, to Mrs. Martha Dandridge Custis, who had two stepchildren, John Jackie Park Custis and Martha Patsy Park Custis. Two-step grandchildren, Eleanor Nellie Park Custis and George Washington Washie Park Custis. He was the first president of the U.S. political party. He also opposed the idea of political parties. He was inaugurated at the age of 57. He served from 1789 to 1797. And he had two other offices or commissions. He was president of a constitutional convention, lieutenant general and commander-in-chief of the new United States. And he died on December 14, 1799, at the age of 67. He was buried in Mount Vernon, Virginia, and he is the only president to be elected unanimously, the only president inaugurated in two cities, New York and Philadelphia, and the only president did not actually live in the White House. He was involved in the planning of the Capitol, Washington did his own bookkeeping and recorded every penny of his expense or profit. His ledger still exists today. And there were 13 stars on the United States flag when Washington became president in 1789. 5 states were added to the Union during Washington's presidency, that being North Carolina, Rhode Island, Vermont, Kentucky, and Tennessee.
Excellent.
He is a lot like Lincoln. The man was infinitely greater than anything he did. A military genius. He wrested liberty from tyranny. He was a statesman. He helped evolve a stable government from political chaos. A patriot. He refused a crown.
Yes.
And that's a little bit background and facts and trivia.
He
about
came
him.
up with, what should we call you, Your Highness, or whatever he says?
Yeah.
Just call me Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
will do,
Like that.
yeah.
He was the first one since, Cincinnatus to actually give up power voluntarily. This Roman who was actually called into service because there was some kind of civil war going on or something. He was a farmer, back to farming. He goes in and he gives it up voluntarily.
Supposedly went back to the same plow that he had left in the field. The plow was still there.
Something like that,
But Washington goes to before the Continental Congress, which was meeting in Annapolis, and tenders, returns his commission. The commission that you gave me, I have completed my assignment.
Yeah.
And this was just unheard of. I mean, in Europe, a victorious general would have marched in and told the government, your services are no longer needed. And
sure.
Yeah.
But
George Washington, being the first president, was very, very deeply aware of everything he did would set the precedent for everybody that would come after him.
He did.
He did not like shaking hands. He felt that was beneath the dignity of the president. He liked to bow.
I hear he liked French kissing, though.
Yeah, he liked bowing. He enjoyed music. He enjoyed dancing. He was always very popular at parties with the ladies. They all liked to dance with General Washington. And like you said, he could have made himself king had he chosen to, but he did not.
the Army wanted him. There were those in the officer corps that were fed up with Congress and wanted him to become king.
Part of the reason why George Washington was elected unanimously is because we had broken away from a monarchy. We no longer wanted a monarchy, and George Washington had no male heirs that could have succeeded him in the presidency. And also, he's a very big man for the 18th century. He towered well over 6 feet. He had a size 14 shoe, or I think it was a 13 shoe he wore, which was extremely big for the 18th century. And yes, he did wear false teeth. He had several sets of them. One set of his false teeth is down here at the Chicago Historical Society. They actually have a set of Washington's false teeth. He did not wear a wig.
No,
he didn't.
No, he didn't wear a wig. He had his hair. He had a hairdresser that powdered his hair and tied it for him and set it for him to make it look like a wig. But he himself didn't wear a wig. And there's also evidence, although he did not live in the White House, he did plan it and pick the site for it. Right. A bad site, as it turned out. It was very swampy and marshy. But there's evidence that he actually did walk through the building before its completion, but he never lived there. No.
In just looking, Washington, as I understand it, when you consider what the value of something was, may have well been the most, the richest president we had to begin with.
He was considered to possibly be the wealthiest man in America in terms of land holdings.
Yeah,
I mean, he was land rich. He wasn't cash rich, but he was land rich.
If it was possible for George Washington to do an unpopular thing in his, not only his presidency, but in his lifetime, 2 things he did that were very unpopular for him.
Chopped on a cherry tree.
Well, not that. That might be one, because he might have got a spanking for that. But one was he imposed the whiskey tax.
Oh, yeah.
And he himself was the biggest whiskey distiller in the country at that time. He made his fortune not off tobacco farming in Virginia. He made it off whiskey distilling. And he imposed the tax. And the other unpopular thing he did is he would not back up the French monarchy during the French Revolution. He felt we should stay out of the affairs of Europe and stay out of this.
Right.
And so many people felt because General Lafayette had come to our aid and everything, we should help the monarchs because they had sent aid to us during the Revolution. But he felt we should not.
The interesting about the Whiskey Rebellion, it's the only time in American history in which the President of the United States personally takes command of the Army. In uniform, Washington actually put back on his, as President of the United States, we can't conceive of a president, even Eisenhower, as president wearing his military uniform. But Eisenhower put his general's uniform and personally led the army into Pennsylvania.
That happened.
And the prospect of facing Washington caused the whole rebellion, just the so-called rebellion. It wasn't much of a rebellion; it just collapsed at that point. But it's interesting. There's a picture in of Washington leading the army, with the Union, with his full regalia from the days of the War of Independence.
They still fit him?
I'm sorry,
it still fit him?
Still fit him. Yeah, he was a trim fellow.
Yeah, he was.
I think we should note, though, that Washington, like so many founding fathers, was a slave owner.
Yes, he
Which
was.
counts the backing of his...
On his death,
the
terms of his will, on his death, the slaves were freed.
That's true.
Yeah, his slaves were freed.
That's
Although
true.
most of them stayed on the estate, they took care of Martha and they saw to her needs and everything like that. But they were free. They were free men and free women according to the terms of his will, as were Jefferson's. I had something else I was going to say about Washington.
people don't realize Washington was commander-in-chief before he became president, because Congress created this rank. We think of the President of the United States as commander-in-chief in the Constitution, but that concept begins in the War of Independence, when the Congress, they commission him a lieutenant general and make him commander-in-chief of the forces. So he was virtually a semi-president during, he had full power, what we would call presidential power in command of the armies during the War of Independence as commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a rift between John Hancock and George Washington. John
Hancock wanted to be commander.
He wanted it, and he felt he should have been, because he sat during the Continental Congress, the First and Second Continental Congress, and he did all the bookwork in that while Washington was out in the field actually fighting the Revolution.
And he sold them.
Oh, I wanted to say that you said about commanding about a sitting president taking command of an army. That happened with James Madison. Little tiny short diminutive James
he was
Madison.
president, but he wasn't in command. He was present with the army. He was not in uniform, and he didn't pretend to actually be commanding the
during
force.
The War of 1812,
he was present with
meet
the
the
army.
onslaught of the British.
Well, Lincoln, of course, as well. I mean, Lincoln went out to during the attacks in 1864. In fact, it said that. There was one of the soldiers who didn't realize who he was. He said, "Get down, you darn fool!" Lincoln is peering over one of the parapets, and the soldier doesn't know who he's talking to.
Right.
"Get down, you old fool! You might get shot."
And you know what? He got down too.
And it was
He got shot.
And the man who said it was Oliver Wendell Holmes. It was Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Is that right?
Yeah, Lincoln was frequently
He was a Democrat.
trying to get McClellan to move his army. That was a big role of Lincoln.
I thought that was one of our public housing developments. Oliver Wendell Holmes.
You know.
Presidential trivia. Let's try to touch on some of the other presidents. We have
Yeah,
many
we
men
were.
that held this office.
I have a story on Washington.
Oh, okay. We have another Washington
Let's
story.
get
Okay.
back from Lincoln. We've done enough for Abe for a while, didn't we?
Yeah, right.
Well, the thing, I read that when he was, I guess, nominated or elected, he goes to New York City, and I think he stopped to see his mother, didn't he? And I think maybe the last time he saw her, and he goes to a boarding house. He's in a rooming house, and he's going to be sworn in. I can imagine him walking out of the rooming house all by himself, and somebody like him, John, you might say, George or Mr. Where are you going? Oh, I'm going down to the the federal building, which is still standing.
Federal Hall.
Federal Hall. And I'm going to be President of the United States. When he was sworn in, he was the executive branch of the government. He was it. Yeah, it was it. He had no employees, no cabinet, no buildings. All he had was himself and the Constitution. And I'm just going to say one other thing. When Congress informed him that they were going to build 2 ships, and he needed someone, Washington needed someone to take charge of the ships. You know what he did? Put an ad in the newspaper. Yeah, and
Admiral needed.
Yeah.
Apply G. Washington.
Right. And he put it in the leading, New York, probably Boston, Philadelphia.
Help wanted.
Yeah, right. Wanted men to take charge of 2 ships. The United States government. Apply G. Washington.
I'd like to see some of the applicants.
Right. And I don't know who. Yeah, and the guy became the first Secretary of the Navy. And the other thing was that all the servants in his White House or executive mansion, he personally hired, and interviewed.
He's I think the two presidents that did not take a salary was George Washington and John F. Kennedy. And George Washington wouldn't take a salary. He says no.
I think Hoover as well. Hoover did not.
Hoover was a wealthy man too. Yeah.
Some people said that Hoover didn't deserve it. But
I
mean, some of his critics said. I mean, that's a cheap. I didn't mean that as a cheap shot, but some of his critics did say
George
that.
Washington said just cover the expenses of the office, and he was much smarter doing that. If you pay George Washington any money, you didn't pay him in federal currency. You paid him in gold. That's how he got paid. It was in gold, and it was just to cover expenses of the office, like for state dinners and things like that. Because he realized the $25,000 was not going to cover it.
A couple of things. Washington deliberately had a suit made in the United States when he was inaugurated. He did not want it because most of our fashions, if you were of the aristocracy, you imported your clothes. Made in Taiwan. It would be imported from Europe. He wanted to set the standard that as president he would wear an American suit of clothes, and he wore a sword. Even though he was not in uniform, he felt that the dignity of the office of president required a sword. Adams, who was about as unmilitary man as could be, followed this tradition. He also wore a sword to his inauguration, but it was broken by Jefferson. Jefferson was a pacifist. He didn't believe the sword was part of the... So that ended the tradition of the President of the United States.
The two men, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, became very bitter enemies at one point, and then later on they renewed their friendship. And they became the strongest bond of friends.
And they died the same day.
Yes, they did. 4th of July. They died just within hours of each other. 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And Adams' last words are, Jefferson
Lives.
still
Lives,
lives,
yeah.
not knowing that he had died
He had
some
died.
hours earlier.
Your name is Tyler. John Tyler, Mr. John Tyler, our 10th President of the United States, largest family of any president. He had 14 children by 2 marriages. Yeah, there are 2 grandsons of John Tyler still living, believe it or not.
That's
They're
amazing.
84 years old and 88 years old. John Tyler was born in the 18th century. He was born when George Washington was inaugurated president. His daughter, Pearl Tyler Ellis, lived until 1947. She lived to the middle of the 20th century.
Wow.
So how do you skip through a whole century with a daughter of a president, from 100 years?
Yeah.
Well, the way he did that was he had her in 1860 when he was 70. She died when he was 2 years. She was 2 years old when her father died. So she lived until 1947. Her father was born in the 18th century. Interesting fact.
And
He was also the first. It was also the first time that a president became president on the death of a president.
Yes.
William Henry Harrison died after only 1 month in office. He caught pneumonia, giving a 3.5-hour inaugural address in the rain. Got sick and died. And then John Tyler fought to get the office. They didn't want to give it to him. They wanted to hold another election. He says, "Nope, by right of the Constitution, I am the president."
Well, they wanted to limit him by calling him an acting
They wanted to call him
president.
acting president.
That's right.
And he was the one that specified, no, I am the president of the United
Yep.
States. He moved into the White House.
right.
He delivered
Yep.
an inaugural address, and he insisted on being called Mr. President.
And he
it's
remained a
interesting because-
staunch Confederate all through the Civil War. He he never took an oath of allegiance to the Union. He stayed a Confederate. Yeah.
But
yeah.
he did perform a service for the country because the Constitution is ambiguous. It said that the vice president shall exercise the duties of the presidency. It didn't specifically say he shall become president.
Well, that's what they were trying to
he
do
was
with the
he was the
loophole,
one
yeah.
that established the precedent that when the vice president succeeds, he becomes the president of the United States.
Only one president of all the men that served. Only one was an ordained minister. And that was James Garfield, who also happened to be assassinated. Yeah, he was the only. He was the
Was
only
it
one.
ordained minister? Really?
He was a minister. He was actually an ordained minister. Yeah.
How many of our presidents were assassinated?
There were 4 assassinations.
Four.
There was Garfield, Lincoln Garfield, McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. Yeah.
Yeah.
They also, a few years back, they tried to say that Zachary Taylor was assassinated. They think he was poisoned. It was arsenic poisoning, and they actually exhumed his body. What happened to him was he drank buttermilk and was eating cherries on a hot 4th of July.
the dedication of the
Yeah.
Washington Monument.
And they thought he supposedly he died from stomach
Groundbreaking.
ulcer. But they tried to prove that he was arsenic poisoned, but they actually exhumed his body, did testing on it, wasn't so. So those are the 4 that were assassinated. Yeah.
As Barry Fitzgerald said in Quiet Man, buttermilk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've had some
interesting.
interesting men that
Yes.
became
Very
president.
much so.
We've had a lot of what they call a dark horse. That's somebody that never actually sought the office of the president and got it thrust on him. Gerald Ford was a dark horse candidate. Gerald Ford served 2 years as the president. He got it on the resignation of Richard Nixon through secession. There was no longer a sitting vice president. He jumped ship before the president did, and then Gerald Ford, as Speaker of the House, took the office. Franklin Pierce was another dark horse. He didn't really seek the office, and he took it. Interesting man. Franklin Pierce had a very strange life. He took his presidency on a very dark note. He was taking a train ride to Washington with his wife and son. There was a horrible train wreck. The son was killed. The son was actually beheaded. He covered his son's body with his cape so his wife couldn't see it. His wife went into shock, and as first lady, she never stepped down from the 2nd floor of the White House. She never held any state functions. And later on, after leaving office, he died not too long after as an alcoholic. Franklin Pierce was a very brilliant man, but he died from alcoholism. Yeah.
We have a street name, and Bob, I don't know if you recall, but a year ago or so, somebody had written into the newspapers about all the streets downtown Chicago named for presidents.
Knox, yeah. Polk.
Dewey.
We did have a Dewey, but they changed it. But anyway, they said, how come there's no Tyler? Well, there was a Tyler, and it...
Sure, there's Tyler Street over there around where all the Italians live.
Yeah.
yeah. Nice try, Jack.
Well, that used to be where the Italians live. Now Taylor Street is actually being incorporated into Chinatown. That's actually the old Taylor Street neighborhood, the old Coletta's Funeral Parlor, right on the edge of Chinatown, which is actually a very haunted building. Yeah. That was the edge. It was a bar there. It was the original Coletta's Funeral Parlor.
Where are you talking, Bob?
On Taylor Street.
Taylor and where?
Taylor, I think it's Taylor and Wentworth, is it, by Chinatown? It's right on the edge of what used to be...
There's no Taylor.
No.
Taylor doesn't run east of the river.
Well, it's Taylor Street, and that was the Coletta's Funeral Parlor, and it's now a bar, and it was called Tito's on the Edge because it was on the edge of Chinatown, but now it's something else. Now it changes hands quite frequently because of all the psychic phenomena.
I'd like to go. Anyway, I'll just finish my Tyler story. We had a Tyler Street, and Tyler was he was appointed or elected to be in the Confederate House?
He was elected to the Confederate House of Representatives, but died before he could take
He was already had been president, correct?
Yeah.
Former president of the United States. He was a Southern Democrat who ran as a Whig to kind of give balance to the ticket with William Henry Harrison.
He looked kind of like Victor Jory.
In fact, that made Jory's career. He was a John Tyler lookalike.
John Tyler needed a one-man show.
Well, anyway, what the Chicagoans did, they already had a Tyler Street downtown, and they changed the name to Congress Street.
Yeah.
And actually, Congress in those days only ran from Michigan Avenue to State Street. Right.
I don't know. They may change it back. Congress has such low ratings, you know.
I know, Congress is now. I just read something that said, I don't know what percentage of people said. First of all, Congress has got a 5% approval rating. He said we'd be better off just picking out names randomly in the phone book. Can I say one other thing about Lincoln, by the way? Not too well known, but our park system really came out of three parks: South Park, West Park, and Lincoln Park. And a number of the smaller parks in the Lincoln Park chain are named for his cabinet. And you think of Hamlin, which was his first vice president, Hamlin Park. Hannibal Hamlin.
Before Missouri, was he from? Or?
I'm not quite sure where he was from. Seward Park, which is down in the north side. Stanton Park, which is also it would be considered in the Cabrini Green section where I grew up. Both of them. I went to both parks. Wells Park.
All the cabinet members.
All the cabinet members, and I didn't know that.
Didn't know. I didn't either.
Gideon Wells, right, and also Edwin Stanton, and also Chase Park, which is up at Leland and Ashland, named for Salmon P. Chase, who was Secretary of Treasury.
Chase and Sanborn,
Chase, and he also started Chase. Yeah,
Chase pulled. Many people who hold high office will use their leverage to threaten resignation in order to get what they wanted. And Chase had done this several times with Lincoln and had gotten what he wanted. What he didn't realize that he had played the hand once too often. Lincoln was fed up with Chase. So when Chase came in once again and offered his resignation, Lincoln accepted it.
He double crossed.
It was like, wait a minute, that's not the way this is supposed to. Thank you very much, Mr. Chase.
Yeah, right.
You have a nice day.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
John, what you just said makes me think of Alexander Haig. He pulled the same thing. Remember? He took it then. Remember?
That's right.
He made an interesting story. Mort Sahl, the comedian, he was all for Alexander Haig. He met him at a party or something. He says, "This guy's great." He said must be maybe almost 20 years ago now, because of course Alexander Haig has passed on since then.
Yeah.
But anyway, he says he was NATO commander at one time, right?
Yes.
Right. So he says he was at a big party and he's smoking Cuban cigars, supposedly, banned from importing now. He says, "You're smoking Cuban cigars, General?" He says, "I prefer to think of it as I'm burning his crops to the ground."
Wasn't it Haig that tried to make himself president too? When Ford?
Oh, that's what he said.
When Reagan got shot, he came on and said, "I am in charge."
I'm in charge.
I want once again. I want to defend Alexander Haig. I want to defend Alexander Haig. I've done this many times in the past. What he did was absolutely correct. He said, "I am in charge here, awaiting the arrival of." He was concerned because he had seen the press secretary go out. The President of the United States has been shot. No one knows how serious the injury is, but they do know that Reagan is an older man to be President of the United States. He's not one of our younger presidents. The Vice President is somewhere in an airplane going off to a meeting, and the press secretary gave the impression that there was no one in charge, that no one knew exactly. And this is, remember, we're still in the Cold War, the Soviet Union. Haig went out. He wanted to reassure the country that there was someone in Washington, D.C., who was in charge of the executive branch. He wasn't claiming that he was succeeding to the presidency. I mean, he knew that he wasn't next in line if the vice president had been killed. But he said, I am in charge here. I'm the next highest office holder. I'm the Secretary of State, which is the senior officer in the cabinet, pending the return of the vice president. I always felt the guy got a bad rap for that.
Yeah, and that all made sense.
He was trying to reassure the nation in a time of crisis that there's somebody in Washington who's actually at least in charge of what remains of the government right there.
John, I am shocked. The newsboys cut a story off.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Edited it like that.
So that's my two-penny defense of Alexander Haig.
I always thought he'd be good portraying like Aaron Burr, So,
previous, I've got to research sometime on how Mr. Chase was given the name of Salmon, the origins of that. I've read a biography, and I haven't come across that. Why would somebody name a son Salmon?
Well, of course, you
say that brother herring or tuna or something like that.
Probably a surname.
Or he was real pink when he was
might have been a family
surname.
Well,
I bet it was
Millard Fillmore. You have some unusual names that creep in.
But
Warren
really
Gamaliel Harding. There are some.
Well, that could
have got to be a family name.
No, it's not. It's not a family name.
Really?
I always thought it was like Delano, and it's not. It's a biblical name. It's a biblical. It's taken from the Bible. Gamaliel is a name of an obscure prophet or an obscure figure in the Old Testament. I always thought it was like Franklin Delano. It was his mother's maiden name or something. No, it's a biblical name. But I want to do one more Lincoln cabinet joke, and that is his first Secretary of War. He assembles his cabinet from all these great leaders of the party, the candidates that were at the convention. And Simon Cameron, who is the political boss of Pennsylvania, and this was, you might have said that's the Pennsylvania way for the way Simon Cameron ran Pennsylvania. And someone came to him and said, they were came to Lincoln and talked about how corrupt Cameron was. And they said, he will steal anything in sight. And Lincoln said, no, that's not true. It's not true that Simon Cameron would steal anything. He would not steal a hot stove. Just about anything else, but he would not walk off with a hot stove.
Speaking of hot stoves, Millard Fillmore was the president of the United States. He was the White House resident when they installed the first stove in the White House. Yeah, he had the first cast iron stove. Until then, all the cooking was done over fireplaces. Yeah,
really?
And that's about all that Fillmore did as president.
Was it Millard or Millard Fillmore?
Millard Fillmore.
And we have two streets named after Millard and Fillmore.
Fillmore is I just defended Al Haig. Now I'm going to defend Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore gets a bad rap. Fillmore is not one of the real zeros in terms of presidential history. He was the man that shepherded the Compromise of 1850 through the Congress after the death of Taylor. Southerners had come to Taylor threatening secession, and Zachary Taylor is a Virginian. He's a slaveholder. He's a son of a Virginia Southerner, and Taylor says, if anyone tries to secede, I will personally lead the army south, and I will hang the first Southerner I find in rebellion against the government of the United States. Unlike Robert E. Lee, General Taylor had no doubt as to where his loyalties lay between Virginia and the United States. His first, and I'm a great admirer of Zachary Taylor for that reason. And that was the end of talk of secession. The idea of Taylor, the great hero of the Mexican War, personally leading the army south, that was enough for that to dissolve, But when he dies, Millard Fillmore is the one that shepherds the agreement, the Compromise of 1850.
What was that? What did that call for? Some kind of balance in the, what was 1850?
The admission of states would be one.
It was probably...
When they was slave and
that's
the
right.
balance?
Alternate. Free states, right.
They were. The problem was, as states came in, there was this desire to have a slave state and a
free state to balance it off. Yeah.
To balance it off, and already there was the beginnings of the sense that the Southerners were just not satisfied that at some point the North was going to try to abolish the institution of slavery. There was this constant tension rising, and they made the mistake in a meeting with the president of threatening secession, and Taylor just he may have pounded the desk, we don't know that, but he made it very clear to them he wasn't going to tolerate it. But the one thing I want to say was the agreement of 1850, usually they give credit to Clay, Calhoun, and Webster, the three great senators at that time. Millard Fillmore was essential to helping bring these sides together, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. And he goes down in history as probably because of that name Millard. I think is probably as much of a reason why he's looked upon as kind of an oddball president. But he's far from the bottom of the heap. Far from the bottom.
Zachary Taylor's wife is the only first lady that there's no known picture of. There's no picture of Zachary Taylor's wife. Yeah, no photograph or oil painting, nothing of what she
Here's
did.
some famous quotes. Who was it that said, "I'm the last president of the United States"?
That was James Buchanan.
Okay, and who said, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead"?
Was Oliver Hazard Perry, wasn't it?
Was it?
I thought
Okay,
was Oliver
very
Hazard
good.
Perry.
Yeah.
And who said, "Sail on, sail on"? Goldblatt brothers.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Bam.
With that little happy note, it's time for a break again.
I'm going to be signing
Oh,
off.
no.